behalf of RBCS and software test professionals, welcome to this webinar on interviewing testers. I'm Rex Black, president of RBCS. We are a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and outsourcing services to companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. I'm the author of 12 books on software testing, including the bestseller Managing the Testing Process and 4 books on the ISTQB program. We are presenting this webinar in partnership with Software Test Professionals. Check out their website at www.softwaretestpro.com. Attendance at today's webinar does earn PMI PDUs. Thank you, Vicki Sasser, for reviewing the material for PDU status and for making valuable suggestions. Attendees will receive an email telling them how to claim the PDUs, including the PDU code. PDUs are available for live webinar attendance only. Before we start the presentation, a couple quick notes. If you have any questions at any point during the webinar, feel free to submit them via your webinar interface, but please note that they are answered at the end. There is no need to ask for presentation copies. The presentation is already posted on our website. You go to rbcs-us.com. Upper middle, it's a resources tab. Navigate from there to the basic library, and you will find it. Also, by attending this webinar, you have been automatically registered for the free e-learning drawing. Check your email over the next couple days and watch the spam filter. I hope you enjoy this free webinar from RBCS. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company. So today we will be, as I said, talking about interviewing testers, a very challenging job for sure, but also a very important one. And we'll look at some ways that you can avoid making some classic hiring mistakes, and also some ways that you can improve your techniques. So things to avoid and things to be sure to do, what we're covering today. So, some of you might recognize the first slide there. I'm familiar with that movie, Interview with the Vampire. So I'm kind of making a crack about, certainly you wouldn't want to hire a vampire. And given that they are mythical creatures, it's pretty unlikely that you could actually make such a mistake. But some hiring mistakes that happen are you hire somebody who is an enforcer type, a process cop or a quality cop. I think that their job as a test person is to tell other people what to do or what not to release and so forth. Or you hire people that have skill problems. They don't know the things they need to know. Or just people who are all around problem people from a personality point of view. They don't get along well, they work well with others, they find things funny which aren't actually funny, for example. There are various kinds of bad hiring decisions that we can make as test managers. And the thing is that you can do tremendous damage to yourself as a manager and to your team by making a hiring mistake. The usual rule of thumb from human resources types is that a manager who's dealing with a problem employee will spend about 50% of their time dealing with that problem employee. So if you're managing 10 people, say, and now all of a sudden half of your time is spent dealing with this one problem person, those other 9 people are suffering in that they are not getting their problems solved by you, things that they need help with. Now, if you've got a smart team, they'll probably figure out a way of soldiering on, but nonetheless, it's a tremendous distraction for you. The odds are that there's not a lot of ROI coming out of the whatever work that problem person is doing. So it's really critical to hire people that you are going to be happy with. So we'll look at the hiring process and start off with some, say, preliminary steps, and then get into the interviewing part itself. If you don't do the preliminary stuff properly, it not only does it create problems during the interviews, you'll also tend to clog up the interview process with a lot of people who probably shouldn't be in there in the first place. So the first part of getting the interviewing process working well is make sure that you've done all the appropriate homework up front. So let's start off by saying, what is the objective here? Well, the objective is, as a manager, the kind of the cliche that you'll hear is always hire people that are smarter than you. Now, obviously, that's not, to be taken too literally, but, you should be looking to surround yourself with people who are smart, capable, motivated, who, by doing their job well, will not only look good themselves, but they'll make you look good. So what we're going to want to do is approach this objective in a very deliberative fashion. Make sure that there's a well-understood process for how the hiring is going to occur, how we're going to evaluate people for an open position. We have to know what the position is that we're trying to fill. It's kind of the old line about, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Well, if you don't know who you're hiring, I guess any job description will do, but then you're going to be in a situation where you're not going to be happy with the outcome of that. So we need to understand what people need to do, need to be able to do, and what kind of attitudes they need to have, skills, qualifications, other kinds of qualifications that might be important, and then carry out interviews in a way that evaluates people against those criteria and allows you to have basically a sorted list of the people that you've talked to, ranging from the least qualified to the best qualified, and then you're going to want to start, of course, with the trying to get the best qualified people on board through the offer process. Now, we're not going to worry about the offer process here, but of course, one of the things that I'm suggesting here is that you actually have not just a person that you want to hire if you have an open position, but maybe 2 or 3 people that you think that you would be happy to hire, some of them being more qualified than others, but possibly more expensive, and then you would move through that offering process with them. So, this is not like the Cinderella fable where you're running around with a glass slipper trying to figure out whose foot it fits. There's likely to be multiple people who would be qualified, but the question is who is more qualified than the rest, and second most, and so forth. So let's get into this process, assuming the slides will actually advance. There we go. Oops. Yeah, okay. So the first thing is, as I said, know what you're trying to do. Know who you're trying to hire. If you don't have a destination in mind, any road will get you there, but you're not likely to end up happy with where you get. So having a well-defined job description is key here. I had a situation with a client about, about a year ago, I guess it was. And I was doing an assessment for them, and I asked to look at their job descriptions for their testers. They had basically 2 positions defined, and I wanted to look at the job descriptions. And I'm looking at these things, and a number of things start to jump out at me. One is it's not really clear what the difference is between the 2 roles based on the job description. The titles are distinct. I mean, one of them was like test analyst, and the other was tester or something like that. It was something that implied a hierarchy, but looking at it, it's like I really don't see a whole lot of difference between these things and the level of skill required, responsibilities, and so forth. And I looked more closely at it, and I realized, well, wait a minute. There's no S in authorized. That's supposed to be a Z. And there's no U in behavior. That should just end IOR, unless, of course, you were not, in the United States. So I'm in Word, and I look and see what language it is and it's in Canadian English. We're not in Canada. We're in Georgia, which, last time I checked, had not seceded from the United States and joined Canada. So what apparently had happened was this fellow, the test manager, had been told, well, you need to have a job description. And so he went out to the internet and downloaded a couple job descriptions and tweaked them a little bit. Now, there's nothing wrong with using a template, going out to reputable internet site or sites and getting a template and going about it that way. But you have to actually customize it for your needs. Just going and downloading something off the internet and going, well, I assume that's going to be fine because it worked for them. Well, unless they happen to be in the exact same business you're in, which is pretty unlikely, you're going to need to make some changes to that template. So, things that you'll want to make sure you have clearly defined in your job descriptions. What are they going to do? What tasks are they going to carry out? What are they going to be responsible for? What level of experience are you looking for? And really, truly here, you always want to, in this process, understand the difference between desired and required. So, it's funny, when Java first came out, I remember the joke being that you would see these postings, people looking for Java programmers, they want people with 10 years of Java experience. Well, hey, guess what? Nobody has that because it hasn't been around that long, So be realistic. What is the level of experience? How many years of experience are actually required to do something? And you have to be realistic both ways. You can underestimate this and overestimate this. So the classic underestimating the amount of experience required that I see is people hiring testers with a technical background, let's put it that way, to lead a test automation effort. And they just go out and look for somebody who's got some experience as a programmer, 2 or 3 years. Might never have done any test automation. I always tell clients when I see that, I'm sorry, but I can tell you how the story is going to end. It's going to end with you're not going to have a positive return on investment on your automation effort, because in order to become truly skilled at any intellectually challenging task, which would certainly include automating tests in a maintainable fashion, you have to spend about 5 years working on it. That's the somewhat famous 10,000 hour rule popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, but it was actually came from some academic studies that had been done. So yeah, 10,000 hours, 5 years, maybe you might need somebody with 5+ years of experience if they're going to be doing something senior. So know the realities of what you're hiring for. Is this a relatively straightforward job that someone can learn fairly quickly and the consequences of them making mistakes are recoverable? Or is this something where you're going to really be betting the farm on this person and, like you would with somebody leading a test automation effort, and if they screw up, then, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Be specific about the skills you're looking for. The required skills and the desired skills. Now, obviously there's all sorts of nice to have. So when I say additional skills desired, these should be relevant. I mean, you don't want to have in there, knows how to play a piano because we have a piano in our office, and every now and then it'd be nice if this person could entertain us. Okay, well, sure, that would be fun if you have a piano in your office for who knows what reason, and you have company sing-alongs or what have you. Yeah, that's all well and good, but that's not the kind of thing I'm talking about here. I'm talking about skills that are actually relevant to the work that you're doing. Now, of course, if you're making software for musicians, well, then yeah, musical skills may very well be relevant to that. Your salary range, you want to make sure that you are clear on the salary range you're going to be offering, and know where that stands relative to your geographic location. Because if you don't know, trust me, any candidate that you would want to hire actually would know where you're sort of positioning yourself with respect to the your competitors, effectively. In this case, they're not your business competitors, but they're your competitors to hire the people you're looking to hire. And if you're low, if you're going to be offering less than the going rate, then you need to think about how you're going to explain that to people in the interview process, what kind of perks you're going to be able to offer them to make up for that. There can be perfectly good, desirable reasons to work for less than your market value. Say you're like a huge animal lover, right? Somebody's this huge animal lover. They've got a couple dogs. They like to be around their dogs a lot. And you say to that person, well, guess what? Our office is dog friendly. You want to bring your dog into work with you? That's fine. Your dog can be here. That person might be willing to accept $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a year less, just so that they're not, leaving poor Fido in a crate for 10 hours a day, right? So, that something to be aware of and know how you're going to deal with. How are you going to overcome an objection related to the money that you're willing to offer? So what level of training and education is required? Are there specific kinds of training that people need to have, things they need to have learned in school? One of our clients does oil exploration software for oil companies. It's geological modeling software. And remember the director of that QA group telling me that he will only hire people with chemical engineering degrees or petroleum engineering degrees or mining degrees or chemistry degrees. He had a whole list of things that he would hire people that had those degrees, geologists. He would not hire people with a software engineering background. He said, this product is aimed at people who are exceptionally technical, but not in terms of the implementation technology. They're technical in terms of the problem that we're solving for them. You can't recognize pass versus fail unless you know how to do the kinds of things that our users who are oil analysts are going to do. And the only place they teach that is in college. I don't have time to teach that to people. So I can teach them what they need to know about software, and I can teach them what they need to know about testing. So, understand what kind of education is relevant, what kind of training is relevant. If you are in a specialized sort of field, then, this is something you really need to think long and hard about. Another example of this, if you are FDA regulated or regulated by any other sort of specialized body, you'll want to look for people that have training and knowledge of how to abide by those regulations. I've seen situations where people were hired and they didn't know those things and they made some mistakes which could have had some pretty serious consequences if they hadn't been caught. So know those things. Certifications. Are you looking for testers that have ISTQB certifications or other certifications, Cisco certifications, etc.? Now, the certifications by themselves, prove that somebody could pass an exam. They have a certain level of knowledge. You want to make sure that that knowledge has actually been applied. So, somebody says, yeah, I've, got an ISTQB Foundation certificate, and, that's where I learned how to test. One of the immediate questions I'd have is, well, when was the last time tell me about the last time you used one of the 4 black box test design techniques that's described in the ISTQB Foundation syllabus to design a test. And, if it's like, well, I've never used them, I just learned about them, it's okay, then I guess that certification didn't do much for you. Obviously, things like security clearances and licenses, if those are necessary. Now, the good news here is in any organization where that's actually going to be the case, you're going to need a license or you're going to need a security clearance. There's probably somebody or a collection of somebodies in the human resource department whose job it is to make sure you don't screw this up and hire somebody who's not actually qualified to work there. So, but make sure that you know it and that it's clearly stated in the job description if somebody has to have a certain security clearance or something. Just in general, make sure that you talk to your HR guys if you have them, your human resources department. Work with them. Look at good and bad job descriptions online. Really kind of take this very seriously. And again, think about the sort of soft elements, if you will. Things like, what are the work hours? Some people, their idea of a good job is one where they can get in at 6 in the morning and leave at 3. Now for me, that would be pure hell. If I was told, like someone could describe the dream job to me and be willing to pay me scads of money for this and not even make me work very hard, maybe 35 hours a week, but I had to be in the office every day at 6 in the morning, forget it. No way. I'm going to hate that. I'm going to hate having to get up every morning at 4:30. I'm just not that keen on having an afternoon, that I'd be willing to have such a miserable morning and basically have to be going to bed at like 8 o'clock at night. So, but other people, yeah, they love that. Now for me, I'm more of a, I can come in at 10, work until 7 or 8. Yeah, that's about my prime working hours. Dress code. Is there travel required? What's the career path? Where is this job going? Again, this is one of these things that anybody that you would want to hire is going to ask you about this during the interview process. So you want to make sure that you know. Somebody who's like, I'm not worried about career path. Oh, well, okay, then that either means that they don't expect to get anywhere, they don't expect any advancement, or they're planning on leaving. So, those are other things to consider. Now, once you have your job descriptions, should be starting, out there posted, and you're starting to solicit resumes, you should be looking at these resumes and basically filtering them out based on your job description. Do they have the required level of skills and experience? Do they have the education and certifications that you've required? Now, this is a place to be a little careful here. You want to, for these kinds of things, skills, experience, education, certification, you want to make sure that you have a way of actually checking this. There was a famous incident in the United States 3 or 4 years ago, if I'm remembering right. A president or CEO or some executive level guy at Radio Shack was fired for having falsified his resume. He listed on there that he had graduated, if I'm recalling correctly, from some sort of business college or maybe it was a military academy. It was something like, it was one of these, like, he's got this prestigious diploma that he's claiming to have. It turns out he didn't have it at all. He had attended apparently, but not ever actually finished. This kind of thing is it's jaw-dropping, but apparently the percentage of resumes that contain material falsehoods is stunningly high. I think I heard somewhere 33% or something like that. It might be higher. These are material things, material misrepresentations. I'm not talking about, somebody claims to spend their free time macrameing or something like that, and they have no idea, and that's not relevant, right? I'm talking actual material falsehoods where they are misrepresenting their skills, their experience, their education, their certifications, salary history, just, in an attempt to get a job that they don't deserve to get or get paid more than they deserve to get paid. So, yeah, make sure that you check this stuff out carefully. A resume, of course, is a written work product. And one of the things that we are going to do in testing is produce written work products. Now, you need to look at the resume as an example of the kind of work they're going to do. And it's probably an example of the best kind of work you can ever count on them doing, right? Or at least it should be, because you do have to be of doubtful sanity to be sending out as in the form of your resume something that was just thrown sloppily together and had not received a lot of thought, right? I mean, that's how not to get a job. I mean, if you don't care about getting a job, by all means do that. But, look for, is this person communicating effectively? Are they respecting my time? Are they keeping this concise? Or is this, some sloppy, rambling, endless array of somewhat meaningless events in their career, I have worked with testers and test managers who will say that, a single spelling or grammar error is enough for them to say, yeah, go on. No, I'm not going to look at this. I don't know that I'd be that categorical about it, but certainly, that is one of the things I'm going to look at. And if I see that there are a lot of problems in terms of spelling and grammar, that is likely to be something that would cause me to put that person much lower on the list of people to talk to. At some point, it would actually cause me to just say, snap, I'm not going to bother talking to this person. That, if they're making these kinds of mistakes in their resume, I can't wait to see the kind of bug reports that they would create. And again, keep in mind the difference between what's required and what's desired, right? You want to filter out based on the required and say, I'm going to eliminate this resume from further consideration if they're below the bar in terms of required. Desired, if people, that should be the thing that kind of puts them higher in the list of people I want to talk to. So now you're getting to the point where, you can start interviewing people, and you want to make sure that this process is solid. So one good practice is to have multiple rounds. So certainly at the very least, you'd want to have a round of phone interviews with someone first, and then followed by the in-person interviews. And, people should be, well, some of our clients refer to the phone interviews as a phone screen. And that's meaning exactly that, to screen out people that they don't want to waste any time on, real honest-to-God interviews. And I've had plenty of people flunk out on phone screens before. I remember I was asking a guy a question during a phone interview, and I asked him about applying a certain test design technique or something like that. He's just like, no, I'm not going to answer that question. And I said, really? It's because this is a relevant question, and by not answering this question, I'm going to end this discussion, and you'll be removed from further consideration. I'm not going to answer that question. So imagine you bring someone like that in for a half day of interviews, and they just, for whatever reason, have such a high opinion of themselves that they just refuse to answer questions. You want to protect yourself from that. You do want to make sure that you've got as many different perspectives as possible involved in this. Now, obviously not, just anyone. Don't be grabbing people out of the organization. But, hey, you've got a different point of view. But what I mean by that is relevant perspectives. So if somebody's going to be working as a tester, identify the people that they will be in regular contact with. Those representatives of those different groups ideally would be part of that process. And the higher up the position that you're hiring for, the more important this is. You want to have a relatively diverse interview team in any case, but especially when you're hiring for someone who's going to be, say, a test manager or director or QA or is on that path, because they're going to have a lot of visibility to a lot of different people. Have a well-defined process, and then we do this, then we do this, then we do this. And each point along the way, remember, the idea here is to remove people who are not going to be a good fit. Now, this sounds really harsh, perhaps. It's like, oh, removing people, how sad, Well, part of what you're trying to do here is indeed distinguish between people you want to have around and people you don't. And that's just what you're doing. You don't want to be, I like this person, and then, they kind of have an interesting life story, and I sort of feel sorry for some of the things that have happened to them, so we'll go ahead and hire them. No, you got to be more, Darwinian, maybe, than that. So remember what I was saying at the outset. If you hire somebody and that person turns out to be a bad fit, that is going to be very damaging, not only to you, and to the organization, but also to the other people on your team. So even if you are kind of a softie at heart, remember you owe it to the people on your team who are going to be working with the person you're hiring to be tough, to make sure that when you get down to that list of these are the people that we want to offer a job to, that everybody is going to be happy that that person was brought on board. So with all that said, now let's talk about, going through the interview per se. There are a number of different types of questions that we need to ask, and then some things that we need to achieve with the interview process. So certainly one of the things is attitude. So one of the questions that I've used very effectively for this is, what do you enjoy about working as a tester? This seems like a softball question, but it actually is a very good way of identifying people whose motivations for being a tester are counterproductive, or who actually aren't motivated to be a tester at all. It might be that what you get probably won't come out quite this bluntly, but you might get an answer that boils down to, I don't really enjoy being a tester, but I can't get a job in anything that I really want to do. This person's coming in the door disgruntled, right? And I've had people like that who, they thought of themselves as developers. Eventually I'm going to be a developer. I can't get a job as a programmer in this company, but I want to work in this company, so I want to get in here as a tester, and then I'm going to agitate endlessly to get into the development organization. I've not seen that work out very well. So we want to make sure that the person's got the right attitude. They're going to be a good fit. They are serious about testing. Usually I am going to be looking for somebody who has a visualized career path of where they want to go as a tester. I also want to look at people who are able to keep positive attitude even when things go badly. So I'm going to ask questions about, what was the last time you had to work 50-hour, 60-hour week or something like that? Whatever the sort of crunch period is in your organization. Ask people about that and ask them how they reacted to it. Now you have to be careful here. There are legal traps that you can get yourself into if you start getting off into issues of work schedules. Because if you say, well, what was it like last time you worked a 60-hour week? Well, I can't work a 60-hour week because I have to pick up my kids at daycare and blah blah blah. You have another kid on the way, something like that, right? And if you then go off into, well, that could be a problem, and and you start asking questions about family relationships and things that are going on, you could very well have crossed into questionable territory at best with that. So make sure that from your HR folks, you're going to start asking questions about work hours and longer work hours and those kind of things, what is and is not allowed. Now, a tester is going to create work products. They're going to present information. So I'm going to want to evaluate how well they do that. How good are they at presenting information? So a question like the one here, for a recent bug report that you had to discuss with others, what information did you include? How did you explain it? So I want someone to be able to explain their thinking process. This is kind of like meta bug reporting, right? I mean, I want them to explain to me their thinking process that goes into putting information in a bug report. If they don't have that level of understanding, it's just like, oh, well, I don't really have to worry about that. We've got these fields and I just fill them in. Well, no, you know, you are producing information for people. How is it that how do you know that that information that you're producing is actually what those people need? You want to make sure that somebody's going to stand by their work when they do quality work, but also that when they make mistakes, they're not somebody who is far more concerned with making the mistake somebody else's fault or trying to pretend it wasn't a mistake, what have you. Then someone who just say, "Oh yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have done it that way. I realize now I should have done this." And then, okay, good. Now that's somebody that I can work with, right? Somebody who I'm going to have to constantly be hammering on to get them to admit that they made any mistakes at all. I don't think so. The ability to come across in a mature way, poke them and prod them a little bit. See, how are they going to do in terms of being the face of the test team? Because that's something that they will do. They'll be interacting with people, delivering information. If they do it well, then that looks good for us. Now, testing is an interesting role in a number of ways. One of the ways is that during test execution, we are going into situations where deliberately provoking things that are unpredictable, right? I mean, the whole reason it's a test is because we're not really sure what's going to happen when we do it. We know what's supposed to happen, at least hopefully we do. We have a reliable test oracle that can tell us what the expected result is. But what is actually going to happen? And these things could vary. So you want to see how people are able to respond to the unpredictable, the interruptions, the having multiple tasks kind of in flight or about to be in flight at any given point in time. What happens if they're in the middle of running a test, say, they see a defect, they have to research that defect, report the defect. Can they go back to the test and resume where they left off and still be effective? Or do they have to basically start over because they've forgotten what was going on? So you want to look for that really organized person. Somebody who's kind of mentally sloppy is not likely to be a good tester. Now, every now and then, testers are going to deliver some information that is going to be controversial. It's going to get people stirred up. So you want to talk to people about how they have handled that in the past. It shouldn't be offensive. They shouldn't be, always coming off as arrogant or, saying, well, look, it's just a bug. You put a bug in there, it's your problem. You want to try to present the information in a way that it's like, okay, this is what we think, and this is why we think this is a problem. Listen to somebody's explanation of why it might not be a problem or why things are, not as big of an issue as you might think. Be careful not to let anybody goad you into a reaction. You want to look for somebody who is not easily riled or flustered. Try to really sort of drill down into this, see if you can get some sign of, if they're questioned on their work, their results, or something, forced to defend it. Do they get defensive? Do they get prickly about it, sarcastic? That's the kind of thing that's not going to play well when a tester's in a room full of developers. So let's look at some types of questions that you can ask to evaluate these various attributes that we're trying to evaluate. One is what's called a behavioral question, and in a behavioral question, you're basically asking somebody to tell a story about how they handled something in the past. And this does give you insight into what they're like to work with. At least it can. you have to be careful because sometimes people are very good storytellers. And they might be able to spin out some very amusing yarns about things that happened on past projects. So, make sure that you stay in control of it. If they start to try to steer the conversation off, one way or the other, then, that you need to go in and say, no, look, I really want to focus on this aspect of what went on. And they start talking about what somebody else was doing, rather than what they were doing, bring them back to this issue of, well, yeah, but what was your role in that? How did you feel about that? What were you doing there? These are really important types of questions, and I have always, as a hiring manager, included a fair number of these in that interviewing process, just to get that feel of, what is it going to be like to work with this person. Now, a situational question is kind of like a behavioral question, except that you're not asking them to tell you about something they did in the past. You're asking them to tell you how they would handle a particular situation that might occur in the future. So, you've got certain challenges in your testing organization, right? So ask them about those. Obviously, that this is, for the more senior people, you don't want to have somebody who never worked as a tester before come in and go, well, I'm interested in your suggestions on how to write a better test plan. I don't have any experience with that, right? But if you're hiring somebody, for a lead or manager position, then you should be able to throw a situation at them and have them react to it. Now, this gives you some idea of how they're going to respond to what they're actually coming into, and it's good just from the point of view of helping them be aware of what they're coming into. Now, the thing is that it's somebody who's got reasonably good emotional intelligence in a face-to-face interview setting. They're going to, as they're giving you an answer to one of these kinds of questions, they're going to be able to read your body language as to whether they're giving you the right answer, and if they're real good, they'll be able to say what they want you to hear, what they think you want them to say, basically. So, beware of that. Try to be just kind of non-committal if somebody's saying something, or if you think something's kind of questionable, don't let that out right away. Oh, that's interesting. Well, why would you suggest that? Why would you think that would work here? Let them get out ahead of this. And if you see them being vague and not responding and trying to get you to give them more details so that they can, try to read the right answer from you, then that's a warning sign. But these are certainly useful types of questions. They are, by themselves, of course, they're very speculative, so, they're not necessarily, central, but they are, I believe, important. Now, certainly to the extent that there are technical skills required to do testing, and there are, we want to explore whether people have those technical skills. So, somebody claims to be able to do black box test design. I'm going to describe the behavior of some sort of system and say, draw me a state diagram for the system that I just described to you, and then show me how you're going to derive tests from that and tell me what your coverage criteria are going to be. And if they don't know how to do that, then they have no ability with respect to state-based testing. And, I'm likely to say, I think I'll take a pass on this one. Now, of course, it's possible that somebody could do that really, really well, but they've never actually done it on the job, right? So when you're talking about these kinds of things, they need to be combined with these kinds of behavioral questions where you also are asking somebody, oh, okay, so, when was the last time you applied this technique to solve a testing problem? Tell me a little bit more about what you did with it. So certainly very helpful. I think essential, really sort of central type of question, provided that they are, relevant. Asking people technical questions that are not relevant to their work just because they have a clear right answer is not helpful. I've seen interviews where tester would come into a developer's office. Developer would have a piece of code up on the whiteboard or something like that, and would ask the tester to describe what the code does. Now, okay, if white box testing is relevant to the tester's job, like for example in an agile world, then that's a perfectly legitimate question. But if this person's only going to be doing black box testing, then that's not a fair question. Now, another thing that's important about technical questions is you want to make sure that the person asking the question actually will be able to recognize the right answer when they hear it. So you have to be more technical, basically more technically skilled than the person that you're interviewing. Okay, the puzzle question, ever popular puzzle question. This is stuff like, why are manhole covers round? Or having somebody do a Sudoku or a Rubik's Cube, or asking questions like, how would you test a salt shaker? People say that these help assess critical thinking skills, creative skills, and so forth. I don't buy that. Basically, with these puzzle questions are effectively IQ tests. And, as the great saying goes, stupid is as stupid does, right? I have known plenty of people who were very, very smart, who you couldn't pay me enough money to work with them. I literally could not pay me enough money. They're just such a pain in the butt to be around. An example, a great example of this is this fellow named Larry Summers. Now, Larry Summers, a couple years ago, everybody thought Larry Summers was going to be the next head of the Federal Reserve, take over after Bernanke left, Ben Bernanke. Nope, Janet Yellen got the job. Janet Yellen, I'm sure, very, very smart person. The thing that did Summers in, he had all the connections and he was the, popular guy and so forth. The thing that did him in is he just had a knack for saying things that would really upset people because they were stupid things to say. Like, for example, he was the president of Harvard, if I'm remembering this right, and he made some sort of comment about, well, I think he was asked about the underrepresentation of women in science, technology, engineering, and math, the so-called STEM career paths, degree tracks, and his response was something along the lines of, well, maybe women's minds aren't cut out for that kind of thing. It was really offensive and really just like, it was one of those kinds of things where, my reaction is, if this guy's such a smart person, then he would know that even if he believes that to be true, it's incredibly stupid to say something like that. But yet, here's this guy, apparently a real genius, but, just not the kind of person you want to have around. So I never use these puzzle questions. I've had people defend them to me, but, I just think there's other ways at getting at what's relevant. And this just isn't relevant. IQ, yeah, obviously you don't want people who are dumb, but other things are going to help you get a sense of whether they have a sufficiently high IQ. I think, the world is full of examples of Larry Summers types who, are geniuses, but they're also arrogant, and they have the emotional intelligence of a braying jackass, and are not the kind of people you want around. Exams. So can you actually put together an exam to look at things like someone's technical knowledge, their ability to organize, their ability to solve particular kinds of problems. Yes, you can. Now, this is something that I have a lot of experience with because I've been heavily involved in the ISTQB program, and one of our central challenges there that we are always striving to do, better and better on is making sure that our exams are a valid and fair way of evaluating the skills of the people who take them. I mean, basically, with an exam, there are two kinds of things that can go wrong. One is that a person can pass the exam who actually does not have the knowledge that they're supposed to have with respect to what the exam is supposed to be examining. The other is that people who are qualified fail the exam. And those mistakes, I mean, you're going to have some level of error on both sides of that, regardless of how hard you try. But the amount of error that you get on both of those has to do with not setting up the questions the right way, and it is really challenging to do. It's also possible to have an exam that is perfectly valid, but the things that you're examining people on are not the key things that are most important. There might be laws that have to do with using exams. The exams could be problematic for any number of reasons. You might not know. You might have problems administering it. Like, for example, there's the this is for personality. This was called the Briggs-Myers test, which is measuring someone's personality type. And if this is going to be something that's relevant, it's not just like anybody can pick this up and use it. So I'm a huge fan of this when it's done right. I just think you do have to be very careful that you don't make any mistakes with respect to these exams. Now, my favorite interview technique, one that I would definitely say should be central to any interview, is what's called an audition interview. So one way that I've done this in the past when hiring testers is we give them a test case, one of representative difficulty, that we know finds bugs, we know will fail. And we tell the candidate, oh, here, run this test, and if you happen to see any bugs, write up a bug report. No, I don't tell you. You're going to see bugs. If you happen to see bugs, write up a bug report. It's remarkable how many people have taken themselves out of consideration by coming back and telling me, oh, no, the test passed. There weren't any bugs. If somebody's going to be creating tests, then, the kind of thing that I mentioned before, you give them a requirement specification element, you give them a user story, and you say, okay, pick a black box test design technique. Design a set of tests that you think adequately covers this story. If somebody's going to be in a role where they're going to do a lot of presenting of findings and so forth, then you might, as part of a group interview with some role playing happening, have the candidates present a set of test results. We have this interesting exercise that we do as part of our foundation course, also our test management course, where we lay out 3 different scenarios, problem scenarios, and ask the attendees to explain to us how they would go about presenting that information. So the possibilities here are endless. The idea is that you would want to look at the tasks and responsibilities that somebody has on their job description and pick out the one or ones that you think are the most important and structure the audition interview questions around those. All right, now throughout this whole process, you should be paying strict attention, of course, of course, of course. Do not be checking your email on your phone or texting someone or, wool gathering. you want to really be focused, really listen. If you're kind of an introvert, work on your eye contact. Work on meeting the person's eyes, watching them, watching their face, listening very carefully as they're saying what they're saying. Take careful notes. Look for their ability to solve problems. Look for their ability to ask really smart questions, for their ability to communicate themselves well, both written and verbal. Make sure that you watch for any hints that someone might be a pain in the butt to have around, to avoid the less politically correct word, but there's you'll hear people talking about the no a-hole rule. This is definitely a place where you want to apply that. Again, no amount of smarts and experience is going to make up for having somebody around who is just constantly starting fires because they are very disruptive, polarizing, unpleasant people. Watch for people giving different answers to the same question. Well, somebody has mentioned to me once in a discussion about interviews that they're always careful to have cross-referencing questions where they'll have multiple interviewers ask the same question and then they check to see if there's consistency, because they'll catch people who are just making it up as they go along. Be ready to push the point. One of the things that you learn growing up, it's like that book and everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten kind of thing. One of the things that you learn is when you're asking somebody questions, and if they start to draw back, pull in, sort of show, hey, I'm not really comfortable, polite conversation says, oh, well, let's change the subject, right? In a good interview, you can't do that. In a good interview, when somebody has revealed that something is a sore spot, a weak spot, an uncomfortable spot for them, if it is relevant to what you need them to be able to do, you need to drill down on it. You need to really push on that point. If somebody's claiming that they've done something really important in their resume, drill down on it. I've had people put things in resumes where they're like, oh, yeah, I know how to do X, Y, and Z, and I'll just start asking them questions, just keep going. What I'm looking for is at that point at which they've gone through all the mastery that I have of that topic, and I can't catch them out. And I'll say, okay, this person apparently does know what they're talking about. Testers, of course, should be curious and interested in exploring bugs, defects, failures, but they also need to know when to say when. They need to know what bug is worth spending 15 minutes on versus the bug that's worth spending 2 hours on. Obviously, knowledge of the business problem being solved, knowledge of the technical means being used to solve the problem, that's something else that you're looking for. Based on where they're being hired into, do they have the appropriate level of testing skill? Do they have experience and background that will be appropriate? And be open-minded about this. I've hired some retired military guys that had experience as non-commissioned officers, staff sergeants, that kind of thing, petty officer level people, and they might not have a lot of technical knowledge about testing per se, but one thing that a person like that does know how to do is organize a group of people and keep them pointed in the right direction. So experience comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So keep that in mind. All right, so to wind this down and get us into the Q&A, just to recap, this is one of the most important things that you're going to do as a manager. A lot of managers are uncomfortable through this process. They, you know, it can be kind of tough. It feels tough. It can be uncomfortable. It's not, you know, the work that maybe gets you excited about testing. All of those things could make it easy for you to sort of go, oh, you know, well, whatever. But if you make mistakes here, you will regret it. So you want to make sure that you have a well-defined process. The process is applied even-handedly to all candidates, both from the point of view of just being fair and getting a valid measurement, but also from the point of view of avoiding getting sued. Have a good stable of interview questions. I hope I've given you some to start with here, some things to think about, but you'll need more. Use the right mix of the different types of interview approaches that we talked about. Make sure that you're ready to employ those. In an interview, remember that you're listening for things that are going to say, yes, I want this person, and or no, I don't want this person. So again, don't let yourself be distracted. Pay very careful attention. I do a lot of interviewing, not necessarily for hiring, but I do a lot of interviewing as part of doing assessments. And it's amazing, you know, if you right set of questions, exploring out what you want to talk about with somebody, what you can learn. If you master this, then you will have a team that will make you look good, which is, as a manager, of course, always what you want. All right, so we get the ad up here, as usual. I'll get the Q&A panel opened up here. I see we have a few questions already, which is good. A question from Bernhard here. It says, I work in a highly international environment. English is a foreign language to most of the employees, like me. However, the only one everyone has a certain level of understanding. I'm therefore not that strict with regard to grammar and spelling errors. How do you see that in a multinational setting? Yeah, I guess, yeah. We have a number of our clients that operate in that sort of situation where they've got offices in multiple locations. You got people who are, you know, their native language is, you know, some French, some Spanish, some German, you know, some Chinese, some Indian speaking, you know, I mean, people with various kinds of linguistic backgrounds. So at that point, you probably don't want to be as strict about this. But, you know, how hard is it when producing a resume to turn on the spelling and grammar checker? You know, I mean, if you're in Microsoft Word and you see little red or blue squiggles under a word, there's a problem there. And I guess I would, you know, I would be a little bit concerned about that. If you know, if you make it clear that, say something like, resumes are to be submitted in proper U.S. English, right? Just make that statement in your call for resumes. Then, you know, if somebody disregards clear instruction like that, then, you know, there's an attention to detail problem, right? There's a famous story, which I always thought was apocryphal, but apparently is a real thing. There was a music group, a rock music group in the 80s and 90s called Van Halen. And there was this story about how they would have these contracts, and the contracts would have buried in them a requirement that there be in the dressing room a bowl of M&Ms from which all the brown M&Ms had been completely removed. And the reasoning behind this, it comes across as like this prima donna rock star story, but apparently the reasoning behind this was that there were a lot of very important details about how the stage was to be set up and so forth, so that they could get their particular display on there, which apparently was very complicated and could collapse and cause people to get killed if shortcuts were taken. So it was a way of testing attention to detail. So I'm thinking, you need to have that. You need to have something that you're going to do that is going to test people's attention to detail, right? And so if it's not, I want something written in proper English, then okay, but how are you going to make sure that somebody's not going to do sloppy work in general? Oh, John says, yes, with reference to the Van Halen story. Yes, due to weight requirements. Great reference. Yeah, now I remember that. It was because of all of the stuff that they were setting up on the stage was very heavy, and it had to be set up using particular equipment, and if it was done in any sort of halfway fashion, as John says, stuff sank into the stage. Yeah, or the stage could collapse, right? So just, figure out some way of getting at that issue of attention to detail. I'm not insisting that it be, obviously you're not hiring, Chaucer or Mark Twain or, Ernest Hemingway here, right? So it's not about that, but it's about attention to detail. Anne asks, are there any special attributes you would recommend for the hiring of Agile testers as opposed to hiring for waterfall projects? Yes. What we are seeing with our clients that are using Agile, when they are hiring a tester who's going to be embedded within the Agile development team, and not all testers necessarily are. It's possible to have a mix where you've got some embedded testers and others that are kept outside of the development teams to do certain types of specialized tasks like environment setup and data setup and so forth. But assuming that we are talking about a tester who is going to be embedded within an Agile team, they're going to be working very closely with developers. In most of those kinds of organizations, the developers will have a very meritocratic approach to perceiving people. Now, by meritocratic, I mean that a person's position in the team hierarchy, and there always is one. I mean, there's always an alpha dog in the pack, right? A person's standing, their credibility, their perceived authority will be based very much on merit. It'll be earned, right? And the developers will be used to assessing that based on technical capabilities. So when you are hiring for people in an Agile team who are going to be embedded like that, things like programming skills, I always say, the best thing, you're a tester going into moving into an Agile world, one of the first things you need to make sure that you learn how to do, if you don't already know how to do it, is be able to read the programming language that's being used to develop the software. Right up there on the list is learn the automated tools that can be used to automate testing of that software. There's a whole kind of set of tools that tend to get used in Agile teams. Know those tools. Start to learn about test automation. Learn about test management. A tester embedded within a Agile team is going to be making a lot of decisions that in a standard sequential lifecycle model with a centralized test team would be made by the test manager. So there's a higher level of management knowledge required as well. So it's interesting, yeah, because the tester needs to be both more technically aware, and also more aware of test management. Let's see. Edwin says, up to today, testing as a profession is still not as respected as development. This creates challenges in hiring good testers. What do you think can be done about this? Do you think something could be done at school, colleges, and universities? Yeah. So certainly, if we were to start to see a significant growth in the number of universities that were offering computer science degree, software engineering degree, whatever they call it, with a specialization in software testing, that would indicate a level of arrival. And I'm talking here at the bachelor's level particularly, though, certainly the graduate level would be good at too. But the thing is that I think I don't run into a lot of people with master's degrees and above in the organizations that I work in, at least not in software engineering. They might have master's degrees in other things. I mean, it's still the point where if somebody's got a degree, most of the time that's going to be a bachelor's degree. So that's why I'm saying it's important that this specialization be available at the bachelor's level, not just at the master's level. So that would be one thing. That would certainly be one thing that would help. Now, in terms of like what can you do within your organization, you need to, when you're hiring people, hire people that see this as a career path. Be picky on that. The person who's just like, oh, I don't actually want to be a tester. I just want to, work in this place for a while and then, ingratiate myself to the development manager and become a developer, right? I mean, I'm not obviously going to say it that baldly, but the point, you'll get at that point, right? You can see that they don't have a career path in mind as testers, then it's like, okay, that's kind of a giveaway that you probably want to be something else when you grow up, right? So you want to look for that during the interview process. Now, the other thing that you need to do too, of course, is you need to create an atmosphere within your team where testing professionalism is expected and understood, and so you're now within the test team inculcating that kind of that idea of we are a specialized profession within software engineering, and we do things that other people can't. And then outside of the team, you need to be able to connect what you're doing with real organizational value. So people start to see, testers is not as a necessary evil to be tolerated on a project, but as, people who are really bringing value in terms of what they do and who, are really want to have around. And not just because, they serve some sort of menial task, but that they're central, right? And this gets to things like demonstrating return on investment, understanding what people's objectives are with respect to testing and quality, and making sure you connect what you do with those objectives and that sort of thing. Question here from Manish, who says, how can I get the PDUs for this webinar? So you might have missed the intro. In the intro, I mentioned that all attendees will receive an email, and it can take a couple days, so please be patient. Sometimes people send us emails right after the webinar is over going, well, I need the PDU claim code. Well, sorry, our software can take a day or two to send out these attendee confirmation emails. So you will get an email, and that will give you the information that you need. Now, at least you should. There was, for a while, and might very well still be, a bug in Citrix where people who attend via mobile devices, phones, tablets, and I think it was even certain kinds of browsers, I could be wrong about that, were not getting this. They were getting the sorry you missed it, which is an email that gets sent to anybody who registers but doesn't attend. If that happens, I mean, we can solve that problem as a one-off for you, but we won't solve that problem twice. So if somebody attends via a mobile device and didn't know, and then we help them get the PDUs, then okay, that's fine. But if they come back a second time having attended via a mobile device, then I'm sorry, that's there's a certain amount of effort associated with responding to that, and this is a free service. So please do be sure that if you're not on a real PC this time, the next time, if you care about the PDUs, you do tune in via a real PC. I got an interesting question from Enoch here. How do you ferret out hidden expectations in an interviewee? We once interviewed someone who seemed like a great fit for the role and the team, but after extending an offer, she asked if she could telecommute 100% of the time, and when we couldn't accommodate that, she didn't accept the offer. Yeah, I mean, people can have weird expectations, without a doubt, and I've heard some pretty hilarious stories about people starting in jobs and for some reason having expectations that were not connected to reality. Now sometimes that's just because of the whole computer culture going back some time now has been in certain companies very tolerant of and even promoting of all sorts of things that certainly would not stand up as typical behavior in a professional environment, shall we say. Having a pool table in an office, okay, that's a little eccentric. Having people engage in running Nerf gun fights, it's impossible to imagine 50 years ago that anywhere that would be considered acceptable. Now, of course, 50 years ago, it would be considered acceptable to go out and have 2 martinis at lunch and be half in the bag. So, I guess we can have debates about, changing mores. But anyway, there has been quite a bit of diversity in terms of what is and isn't considered acceptable. So there's always a risk that this kind of thing's going to happen to you, Nick. Now, I would say in terms of telecommuting, this is one of those things that you just want to make sure that you've got addressed in your job description. Now, especially if you live in one of these geographical areas where getting into the office can be a real pain. Los Angeles, Bay Area, Silicon Valley, New York, Boston, all these, the Dallas, Atlanta, in places where traffic and commute time is an issue. I think this is something that you can sort of anticipate is going to come up, and then people are going to look at things like telecommuting. They are going to want to look at things like flex time. So I think that's stuff that you just have to try to anticipate. And of course, if somebody surprises you with something, then just make a note of it and make sure that you ask it next time. I had exactly this come up in a very strange way once. The most unusual example of this that I can think of, the hidden expectations. I was doing some consulting work, long-term consulting work with a client that was making, I guess you would refer to it as a entertainment system of sorts, in the sense that it was a dating site, and this was well before the ourtime.com and all these other kinds of dating and hookup sites that they have now. This is one of the early birds in that world, and they were organized into various communities based on someone's objectives, long-term relationship versus one night encounter, and orientation and so forth. And some of the chat messages and so forth that went back and forth got pretty saucy. And so as part of the interview process, I actually was exposed to a sequence of these messages, which ended with one that really was quite graphic. And at the end of that, so they just said, look, we want you to be 100% aware of what's going on here. We do not want you to be in a situation where you are taken aback at some future point. You know, if this is going to be a problem, we need to know about it now. And it turned out that the way that they had discovered that was that they had somebody out who, you know, was a good fit, you know, skills-wise and everything. But then this person got exposed to some of these messages that went back and forth, and he went to the project manager and said, well, I'm sorry, but my religious beliefs make it impossible for me to continue on this project. I can't be involved in supporting the kinds of activities that this system is clearly enabling, and I'm gone, effective now. So, you know, it's kind of hard to anticipate, right? You have to sort of think about what you're doing, you know. If you're doing something that some people might take offense at for whatever reason, or, you know, it's somehow controversial or something, then, you know, that might be on the list of things that you have to ask questions about. And, you know, I think that the way that these guys did it with me, by just exposing me to, you know, increasingly more intense versions of these personal ads, effectively, which what they were, you know, was a good way of going about it. Because had they said, well, you know, do you consider yourself a pretty tolerant person? Are you, you know, open-minded about differences in lifestyle? Then, you know, yeah, of course I would say, yeah, because, you know, this is pretty much the obvious right answer. But, you know, the only way to know for sure was what they actually did, was exposing me to the messages and then checking to see, well, you know, what's my reaction? And my reaction was, well, you know, it's nothing described there that it's against the law or involved hurting anybody, so, you know, I'm okay with it. So, yeah, that's a great question, though, Nick, and it is something you definitely want to think about. So try to think about what those expectations could be. Okay. So Bernard says, nice webinar. Look forward to meeting you in Vienna. Well, very good. I will be in Vienna in a couple weeks, and in Budapest after that. I'm looking forward to it as well. So thank you for attending. Thanks to all of you for attending. I know this is a holiday week, so we kind of light turnout, but I think this is a fun and interesting topic, and I hope you guys found this a worthy investment of your time. John, well, Jill says thank you, so you're welcome. And John forwarded a link, which I'm going to try to see if I can get this out to all of you guys here. Oh, shoot, it doesn't want to let me do it. Let's see. Oh, yeah, send a chat message. Okay. I think that just went out to, let's see, all audience. What I'm trying to do here is get you guys this link about yeah, there we go. Oops. Trying to get you guys this link. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do it, though. So, anyway, I think you could probably do this just by a web search. If you do a search about, type in the truth about Van Halen and those brown M&Ms, you'll be able to find this link that John sent me if you want to hear that. It's a pretty funny story, and definitely something to keep in mind. You know, there are a lot of different ways of going about attention to detail. You know, so putting a bowl of M&Ms out and giving somebody some kind of requirement that says that, in fine print somewhere there shouldn't be any brown M&Ms might be one way of going at it. So anyway, to close the session down, a little bit more about the resources available through RBCS. As many of you are probably already aware, we run these free webinars once a month, so you can sign up at rbcs-us.com. If you want a special webinar presentation for your company only of this webinar or on any other topic related to software testing, contact us at info@rbcs-us.com or via our website. You can also sign up for our free newsletter at rbcs-us.com. So it gets you valuable discounts on consulting and training services and a every other month newsletter that includes a featured article on software testing as well as news about what we're up to lately. We are on Twitter at RBCS and we're on Facebook, RBCS-INC. Remember to check your email over the next couple of days because you could be the lucky winner of a free e-learning course from RBCS, and you were entered to a random drawing just by attending. If you know anybody who you're thinking, wow, we really wish so-and-so could have heard this webinar, we will be doing an evening version of this webinar next week, which you can sign up for on our website. This recorded session will be posted in our digital library as well as on our YouTube channel sometime in the next week. So we offer these free resources as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are not just a for-profit company. This concludes the webinar. Thanks to everyone for attending and look forward to seeing many of you at future webinars.